It's Thursday, the 14th of September, 2023. Welcome to the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed, where we give you the top 5 business stories you need to know in just 5 minutes. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Jennifer Duke.
Good morning.
All right, now 5 stories in 5 minutes. Let's get going. Story number 1, Qantas has suffered another serious blow. The airline has lost a High Court appeal. The court upheld a judgment against Qantas that its sacking of almost 1,700 staff back in 2020 was in breach of the Fair Work Act.
Yeah, Qantas previously claimed that it made the decision to get rid of these workers and outsource the roles for an annual cost saving of $103 million and to remove an additional upcoming $80 million expense on ground equipment handling. But because of the timing, staff members were unable to take protected industrial action, which they have a right to do. These legal proceedings were started against Qantas in November 2020 by the Transport Workers Union, who said the sackings were unlawful. The federal court agreed, as did a full bench of judges, and now the High Court has backed this decision for a third time.
Now, this story really grabbed everybody's attention yesterday. What was the response like outside of court when the judgment was handed down?
So the court was packed with some pretty emotional workers who'd lost their jobs, alongside ACTU Secretary Sally McManus and former Transport Workers Union Secretary Senator Tony Sheldon. Mike McNess from the TWU was up front with a message for corporate people of Australia that governance needs an overhaul, and the unions want the entire Qantas board to be rolled.
Now, this is the latest in a run of very serious incidents for Qantas. How has the airline responded?
So Qantas said in a statement that it deeply regrets the personal impact on staff. The airline acknowledged and accepted the court's decision, and the statement said that Qantas made the decision mid-COVID when borders were closed and it was facing a multi-year crisis. Compensation for workers and penalties are still being worked out, and this could be in excess of $200 million.
Okay, on to story number 2. How about this one, Jen? Rich Lister property developer Tim Gurner, who is the owner of Gurner Group, has lashed out at workers, saying they've been paid a lot to do too little over the past few years and there needs to be a change.
Yeah, Gurner was speaking at the AFR Property Summit yesterday, and he really didn't hold back his feelings about employees. He said people had simply decided during COVID that they didn't really want to work so much anymore and the dynamic needed to change. And how might this dynamic change happen? He thinks it should be a rise in unemployment by as much as 50%. That could be about 200 to 300,000 people out of work. And I have to quote this in his words. He said, "We need to see pain in the economy. We need to remind people that they work for the employer and not the other way around. There's been a systematic change where employees feel the employer is lucky to have them as opposed to the other way around." It was pretty brutal.
Yes, it is a little bit. Now, story number 3, potato cakes, potato fritters, potato scallops. It's highly controversial as to what you actually call them, but whatever you do decide to call them, the US wants them. A Melbourne manufacturer, Cracker Jack Foods, has been gobbled up by the US fast food giant Lamb Weston for an unspecified price.
So Cracker Jack's annual revenue is about $20 million, and it's a major supplier for fish and chip shops, clubs, pubs, cafes, and even briefly McDonald's at one point. And the Financial Review reports that the US buyer wants to double down on production with the company. At the moment, the business has 2 Melbourne plants, which Lamb Weston is acquiring as part of the deal. It's possible that Lamb Weston might look to snap up more Australian businesses in future as well, because the company bought up 2 other local businesses, Marvel Packers and Ready Meals, in the past few years.
Story number 4, average Australians concerned about housing affordability might get a new forum to speak to the federal government. Independent Allegra Spender has been drumming up crossbench support to create a citizens' assembly on housing so that everyone gets a say.
This would be a new body that's set up to provide advice and feedback to the government on housing and housing affordability, made up of everyday people. The AFR spoke to Spender, who said it would bring together Australians from across all generations, and they could get philanthropic funding for the project. Julia Gillard actually proposed a citizens' assembly in 2010 on climate change, but ended up replacing it with an expert panel. It's not clear whether Spender's idea has had cut through with the crossbench, though we know that the Greens are positioning themselves as the party of renters at the moment and are very focused on this issue.
Okay, last one. Story number 5. Aussies want to raid their superannuation right now to fund expenses, home buying and spring breaks, according to a new survey from comparison website Finder.
According to their research, more than half of those that they surveyed would dip into their super right now, given a chance. And the most common reason was, unsurprisingly, to tackle the cost of living and take pressure off their household budgets. A further 15% said they'd use it to buy a home, another 8% would use it for an investment property, and 4% said they wanted to use it to buy a property for their child. But really worryingly, 8% wanted to just blow their retirement funds on a holiday, which might explain why the government is so stringent about who can and can't tap into their super funds. Also of concern was that almost 60% of survey respondents said that they didn't know how much they have in their super right now.
Okay, there we go. The top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Thank you, Jen.
Thanks so much, Michael.
That was Jennifer Duke, who in her day job is the economics correspondent for Capital Brief. It is Thursday, the 14th of September 2023. Remember to hit follow on the podcast, and if 5 minutes isn't enough, you can find our longer daily show called Fear and Greed Business News wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed. Have a great day.